Broadcasting from New York City to the world, it's the G-Man Interviews.
Welcome. Since the mid-70s, Ted Glick has been actively involved in community organizing efforts around environmental, tenants' rights, community development, and racial justice issues in Brooklyn, New York, and northern New Jersey. On a national scale, he has been a leader in coalition building and independent politics. From 1995 to 2005, he was the national coordinator of the Independent Progressive Politics Network, with which he continues to work, and is a coordinator of the Essex Passaic Green Party. In May 2006, he became the national coordinator of the U.S. Climate Emergency Council and is currently national campaign coordinator for the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. He has participated in and led hundreds of actions and has been arrested 17 times for acts of nonviolent civil disobedience, including 6 times between October 2006 and April 2011 on climate issues. Over the years, Ted's commitment to social justice has led him to take part in 20 extended fasts, 6 of which were more than a month, including the Climate Emergency Fast in the fall of 2007 and 2 fasts in 2009. His prolific writing on the movement includes his 2000 book, Future Hope, A Winning Strategy for a Just Society, and his column Future Hope, which has been distributed nationally since 2000. In late 2009, he completed a book manuscript entitled Love Refuses to Quit, Climate Change and Social Change in the 21st Century. On February 20th, he will be joining people from across the Mid-Atlantic who are opposed to hydraulic fracturing, also known as fracking, in order to take a stand against what many are calling the biggest single gas drilling threat we face, Cove Point. Critics of the plan argue that if the Dominion Resources project is approved, there will be increased pressure to frack throughout other states, which would have a devastating impact on communities and the environment. Ted Glick joins us to discuss this development and the upcoming rally. It's a pleasure to welcome you back to the show, Mr. Glick.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your offer.
Bill McKibben calls Cove Point one of the most important fossil fuel fights in America. Firstly, for those who may not know of his background or work, who was Bill McKibben?
Bill McKibben wrote what is considered to be the first book for the general public on the issue of global warming, on climate change. He wrote it in 1989, and he's been writing books ever since. I think he's written at least 15 books. He is primarily a writer and an author, but he did decide in about 2006, 2007 that it was necessary that he become active, much more active than he had been as a writer, in organizing to try to reverse what was happening as far as the escalating heating up of our atmosphere through the escalation of the burning of coal and oil and gas, the primary reason for global warming. So he, ever since then, has been a leader, very much one of the main leaders both in the United States and internationally, in the movement to get away from fossil fuels and onto a path of wind energy, solar energy, geothermal, the clean energy sources of the 21st century.
And what's going on at Cove Point to make him say it's one of the most important fossil fuel fights in America?
Cove Point is a location where Dominion Power, which is a dominant energy company in the state of Virginia, has what is now an import terminal that was built about 35 years ago along the shore of the Chesapeake Bay in a very small little place called Cove Point in southern Maryland. And they have put in a proposal for it to be changed into an export terminal, which would mean that gas, primarily that would come from the process of hydraulic fracturing or fracking, gas would come to Cove Point, and to the tune of about 800,000 cubic feet per day, this gas would be liquefied, at a power plant. It would be loaded onto 1,000-foot-long tankers. It would be shipped to India and Japan. It would be unloaded. It would be reconverted from a liquid back to a gas, and then it would eventually be burned over there for heat or perhaps other purposes. And the result of all of this from the standpoint of the climate is that that whole process would make the gas that eventually gets burned, it would make it worse than coal in terms of its impact on the climate. It would be a stronger greenhouse gas in terms of its impact than coal, in addition to having some very major impacts in the immediate area itself in terms of pollution, in terms of the risk of a major accident, in terms of noise pollution, etc. There's a whole series of very negative impacts that would take place environmentally in the area where it would be built. And just as important, this is one of about 20 proposed export terminals that the gas industry wants to have built all around the coastlines of the United States. This is the major one in terms of the Marcellus Shale region, where, coming from New York down to West Virginia and beyond is where the Marcellus Shale fields are, about a mile or so below ground level. And if this export terminal is built, it will dramatically increase the process of fracking, which will mean it will dramatically increase the build-out of pipelines, of compressor stations, which are a very unhealthy thing. People don't want to live next to one. And it absolutely will transform even more the whole energy reality here in this Marcellus Shale region in ways that are going totally backwards in terms of what we need. We need to move forwards to wind, to solar, to the clean energy sources, not backwards to building and escalating the building up of infrastructure to make the burning of fossil fuels even more extensive than it already is. And that's what this will do.
The Keystone Pipeline and Cove Point seem to represent something that's becoming commonplace in not just American business, but society. Large companies with very little oversight or regulation going into cities and towns and drilling against the wishes of the community. What would you like to see happen legislatively to offset this problem?
Well, one of the key things that would make a difference would be to put a price on greenhouse gases, on carbon, on methane, which is essentially what gas is. Natural gas is 95% methane. That companies which bring gas or oil or coal into our economy would need to pay a steadily increasing price for doing that. This is a way that the use of those fuels, the mining, the production of those fuels will begin to decrease. And the clean burning fuels, the wind, the solar, not even burning, the wind energy, the solar energy, geothermal energy as the primary renewable sources of energy that we have that are developing and that are basically the best sources of renewable energy for various reasons. Those would be incentivized. Those would become much more attractive. They already are growing. Wind and solar in particular are growing tremendously rapidly. There's been something like a 100% increase in the amount of solar panels installed in the United States in the last few years, and that's really shooting up. And it's also escalating worldwide. So, but a price on carbon, a legislative price on carbon, is it's kind of a market-based way. It's interesting that there are economists, conservative Republican economists, who support this either through a tax, putting a tax on carbon and other fuels, other greenhouse gas causing fuels, or perhaps doing it through an auction process, putting a cap, a steadily descending cap on the amount of carbon that can be put into the atmosphere with an auction in terms of permits that companies would need to get. So legislatively, that is definitely the most significant thing that could be done to drive the shift that we need to make.
In the information that was sent to me, Dominion Power, which I also believe is called Dominion Resources, was described as a mega polluter. Do you have any background information on the company or whether or not they've been fined in the past?
Dominion supplies something like 80% of the electrical power for the state of Virginia. It's basically about as close to a monopoly as you could get these days as far as the state of Virginia. I don't know about fines, quite frankly. The state of Virginia fining Dominion is kind of like an oxymoron in terms of the way it works. It's kind of like the opposite. You know, the Virginia state legislature, which is so influenced, let's say, by Dominion power with its resources and its campaign contributions and so on. You know, it's more like, you know, the legislature would give them awards for being great citizens almost no matter what they do. That's more the reality,
okay,
rather than there being any fines. But one of the interesting things about Dominion Power, which you know, sometimes puts out ads talking about how it's such a great supporter of clean energy, they put forward a 15-year plan for where they would be getting energy from for the citizens of Virginia. They did this last year. And in that 15-year plan, by 15 years from now, their projection is that they would be something like 0.5% of all of the power that they provided would come from renewable sources, which is just, it'd be laughable if it wasn't so incredibly backwards in terms of the way that we need to move in this country. So that gives you an idea about Dominion Power, how it operates, and how committed it really is to clean energy.
Tell me about the rally scheduled for February 20th.
Well, this is part of a whole campaign that has been going on, a kind of a grassroots mobilizing campaign that's been going on for a number of months. There, in the month of November in particular, there was a tour that the group that I work with, the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, organized along with a number of allies. And there were 9 town meetings over the course of the month of November all across the state. And about 1,500 people came out altogether to those different town meetings, and a lot of people learned about Cove Point. People learned what really is involved, learned the details, the information, and that has definitely helped to stimulate a lot of ongoing activity and concern. So the demonstration on February 20th is the first major, not just statewide, but really kind of region-wide demonstration on this issue. It's happening on February 20th in Baltimore because on that day, the Maryland Public Service Commission, which needs to give Dominion an air permit, a permit in order for them to build this thing, they are having their first day of hearings on that issue. So we are going to be there at 12 noon in War Memorial Park downtown. There'll be a short rally. There'll be a march up to the building where hundreds, perhaps 1,000 or more people who are going to be attending, which on a work day would be a very significant action, probably the biggest environmental demonstration in Baltimore in a very long time, maybe ever. And people can find out more information at stopcovepoint.org. There's lots of information there about both the issue in general and about this specific action. This is really a very important day in terms of this movement about Cove Point to try to stop this very destructive plan. It's also a very important action in terms of the greater movement to get away from these dirty fossil fuels and onto the clean energy path. Because this is, as Bill McKibben, as you mentioned, as Bill McKibben said, this really is one of the major fights going on right now in terms of this shift. It has region-wide impacts in this whole Marcellus Shale region as far as what it will do as far as escalating fracking. And so it's a very important action.
And again, just to point out the importance of this rally and the people participating, because I understand there are a number of noted individuals and organizations that will be on hand. Can you name some of them?
Yeah, there are a number of groups. There are actually many groups. They're listed at the website stopcovepoint.org. But some of them include Reverend Lennox Yearwood, who's the president of the Hip Hop Caucus. He's going to be speaking. Lois Gibbs, who was the leader of the whole fight decades ago at Love Canal. The famous Lois Gibbs is going to be speaking. Mike Tidwell, of course, is the director of CCAN. He will be speaking. There will be people speaking from Pennsylvania and New Jersey and New York who are fighting against the fracking that's taking place, or actually, in the case of New York, fighting to prevent fracking from coming into the state of New York. You know, there's various groups throughout Maryland, the Sierra Club, a Credo, a Citizen Shale in Western Maryland, Food and Water Watch. It's a broad mix of a lot of different groups, and it's a major action, a major mobilization.
Thank you very much for being here.
All right, take care.
That's going to do it for this edition of the G-Man Interviews. Thank you for tuning in, and feel free to contact me with comments, questions, or requests to be on the show at fromthegman@gmail.com. Until next time, stay cool, stay safe, and stay informed.